Hi, folks. My name's Maud Mosley. My pronouns are they, them, and welcome back to Tunes Tuesday, a weekly series where I sit down with queer, 2S LGBTQ plus bands and musicians to talk to them about their music, their experiences, and so much more. Today, I am joined by New Jersey-based shoegaze band Fox Teeth. Thank you so much for joining me. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Jade from Foxy. I am the vocalist as well as the guitarist for the band. Um, I'm super stoked to be here. I've actually never done any interview that wasn't just really focused on music. So I'm, again, super thankful to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. And I love that you're bringing up that, not super focused on music, because actually one of the first questions I have for you is not directly about music. And I wanted to bring up that recently you participated in a live stream fundraiser to support musicians in the NYC area who have been impacted by the pandemic because, as lots of us know, this has had a huge impact on, everyone, but particularly musicians who lost a lot of the ways that they made money. Can you share a bit about the New Jersey music scene and the support you've seen through this tough time?
I can say that before the pandemic did hit in North America, I was still pretty fresh in the scene. I did previously play with a few other bands before really getting Foxy together and playing as a full band. And I've always seen that there is a community here, especially just with DIY in general, that there's very close-knit people that are willing to watch out for you and to help you out with different things or to kind of guide you through the process of becoming a DIY musician, which is really awesome. It honestly was not hard, at least in my experience, it was not hard for me to really get my foot out of the door. The first time that I ever released anything under Foxy, there was a song I recorded in my basement on GarageBand, and people loved it. And I had all these bands following me, and they're like, hey, if you ever want to record, here's where we go, just offering advice. So once the pandemic hit, I think the community did grow even closer because there were people willing to help out with funds, willing to do things, because we had transitioned from being able to go to basement shows or small venues and, pay to see these bands or pay for their merch in person, to really having everything go digital, which is not easy to do, especially if you're someone who doesn't have a large digital footprint in a sense. So I did see a lot of bands kind of finding new ways to work around that to help each other, and not even just to help each other, but to raise money for different fundraisers. I know, like you did mention, the one that we just did, we raised money to help musicians in New York City, to kind of get by with everything going on because we can't play shows and we can't make money from touring. And although there's definitely other ways to make money, I would say that playing a show and having people physically be there is the best way to help out, to have any funds go towards your band. So doing live streams like that, I think, has been the biggest thing that has impacted a lot of other artists. I know we even had live streams that we did in the past that we got a few donations from, or we had a lot of people follow us from, and they went to our band camp, they paid for our music, they bought our merch. So it does really change the way that you go about not only life as a musician, but also just how to really present yourself in a way where you're able to not only help yourself financially, but get yourself out there as a musician, because it's not easy to be in a band in general. Even pandemic or no pandemic, it's not easy. But when you have something that's severely affecting the way that live music goes on, you really need to find ways to work around it. And I could definitely say again that the DIY scene in Jersey, and I think really anywhere, definitely on the East Coast, a lot of people have really come together to kind of find solutions to that and find ways to help their friends or help their own bands, help other bands. And I've seen so many like online festivals, or people just, I know even us, like, I want to say, I don't know if it was last March or it was last May, where we really started putting out merch a lot more, and I started being able to focus kind of on other aspects that I had never thought of, because the mindset I always had was, record music, play music, that's it. And we really kind of doubled down on our visuals, and like we had basically a music video or some sort of lyric video for every song off of our album Tight. And for the most part, that was just me like sitting at home with nothing to do. So again, just finding these solutions to find ways to help yourself financially, help yourself visually, and really draw in attraction from new supporters and new fans. And it really is an amazing thing to see, because you can see how creative people can get with these different things, and how much they can put into it, and how many bands come together to work on these things.
You bring up just so many important points there. And I love that you're really talking about like the sense of community online and offline, and how that transition has been, and hopefully with all the support we've been seeing online, all those like little live stream festivals we've been seeing that you mentioned, I can't wait to see those become bigger and greater, once they can. And you also mentioned that like digital footprint aspect, that like social media. And I wanted to bring something about that up, because you noted on social media that it feels really great when people add you to lists that celebrate non-binary and gender non-conforming artists. And I just was wondering what feels good about that inclusion.
Well, for me personally, it feels awesome to be pointed out as you're kind of taking this musician for not just saying, hey, they're a great musician, you should listen to them, but they're like, hey, this is a part of their identity and they make great music, and those two things intertwine for a lot of those musicians. I know for myself, definitely. So it just feels like such an honor when people put us on playlists like that. The first time that ever happened was actually in the summer, and I checked our Spotify stats, and it had, someone had made a playlist that just said LGBT artists that I love, and it almost made me cry, because I thought it was so beautiful and so cool to be not put in a category, but kind of brought together with these other musicians that have these similarities as well, and to be put in a playlist with them, even if it's someone's personal playlist. It's just a great feeling.
Yeah, that's so wonderful. And can you speak a little bit? You mentioned that, your music and your identity is really intertwined. Can you speak a little bit to that?
I think the biggest thing for me with that is playing music and writing music is probably the best way that I express myself as a person in general. And I feel like with my identity, I'm pushing it into my songs, even if it's simple. Like the lyrics are very straightforward. I use a lot of analogies, but the concepts of the songs, like trying to think what song would be probably the best example. I think Yellow Houses, everyone says that feels like the best example, and they're like, that's like the Girl in Red Fox Thief song. I've had people call it that, which is really funny. But it is about, a relationship, and how much a relationship can affect you. And I feel like, even though it was a personal standpoint, and for me, I was like, yeah, this is just how I felt after a relationship. I feel like it was so intense because it wasn't a heteronormative relationship, and that allowed me to make the song so intense. Because even now, like when I look back on the lyrics, in a sense I laugh, because I was 17 turning 18, or no, I was 17 when I had started writing that song, and then I was 18 when I finished it. And I had put the lyric in basically like saying, I'm so sad that I want to sit in a house and set it on fire. And it was like over the top, extremely dramatic. But that's just how strongly I had felt about that passionate feeling. And even though like I had never explicitly said anything, it just was how I reflected myself. And I know there's a lot of other musicians, larger musicians too. I know, for example, like Lynn Gunn of Paris. All of her songs are very obviously queer songs, and even though it's never explicitly said, you can just kind of take that from them. You just can connect to them. And I know she's even pointed out, like, she's never even put pronouns for anyone in her song. She always writes a song like she's speaking directly to someone or about someone. And I've also always done that, and it was never intentional. It's just always happened. But yeah, I just feel like that is a big part of pushing my identity into my music, as well as being more comfortable in my identity. Before, when the band first started, I looked nothing like this. I will say that. I had like a bob, I had bangs, I wore so much more makeup, which I still do sometimes because makeup is awesome. But I was just, not that I wasn't myself, but I was just kind of doing, what was seen as the norm, and really putting myself in a position where I was like, well, I'm just playing music. Like, I'm just going to look this way. It doesn't have to relate to how I feel while I'm playing this music. And then it was like, as I got to grow more with the band, and once we were like sitting down recording the album, the last song that I had written for the album, a sad song, and I literally said, that I was going to shave my head. And I ended up doing it like right after writing the song. And that was like a big deal for me, expressing like not only how I felt, but just expressing like, hey, this is something I want to do. Like, this is how I feel. This is how I want to look right now. And I was able to really have that confidence to do something like that because of being able to play music and, you know, having a really great community as well, backed behind what we were putting out or what we were talking about. So it intertwines in kind of an odd way, at least for me, because it's not explicitly out there. But for me personally, it always felt like there was that connection. And I know there's people that have also told me, like, they're like, hey, I listened to this song and it reminds me of this part of my life or this problem I'm having with my identity. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, that's how I felt writing it. So it's awesome. It really is.
Yeah, that is so powerful. And thank you so much for sharing that. And then I do want to speak a little bit about the music that you've been referencing, because you released your debut album, Tight, in 2020. And since then, you've been sharing actually some leaks for LP2, which is so exciting. And I just was wondering, what did you learn from your debut album that you'll be able to carry into this next one?
The biggest thing that I learned is how to fill up empty space. Definitely, when I listened back to Tight, and I honestly, I don't listen to the album that much. I listened to it when it came out, and I'm still kind of like, you know, imposter syndrome, where I won't necessarily, you know, it's kind of like how Haley Williams says that she doesn't listen to Paramore. I don't really listen to Foxy unless I'm showing it to someone or they just so happen to be listening to it. But I will say with the album that we had a lot of empty space. It was the first time I had ever written an album, and we didn't really plan to do it. We came out with our song Donnie Darko in March of 2020. And that was our first song as a band together. That was the first thing that we had ever worked on in a studio. I had never been to a studio before that song came out. And overnight, I want to say it was either overnight or within the first 2 days, it got over 1,000 listens, which had never happened before. And I was like, whoa. I was like, people like us, guys. Like, we've got to keep pushing with this. This is awesome. And it's actually really funny that we had decided to do the album not because of how the song did, but because of the picture that I took, which became the album cover. I took it one day right before quarantine started. So the picture was a very big deal for me. It was the last time I ever hung out at a restaurant. And I took it and I edited it, and I was like, whoa, this looks so cool. Like, this would be so cool as an album cover. And at the time, like, it didn't have all the effects on it. It was literally just a picture with like a little bit of grain over it. And I sent it to my bandmates, and they were like, hey, you know, this would be good as an album cover. We should focus on writing an album. And I was like, you know what? I was like, we've got time. You know, I wasn't, my job had closed, so I was at home. My school was completely online. I was like, guys, we've got the time to do this. And we have this opportunity to really sit and work on it. We need to do it. There's no way that we can't take that chance. And that's pretty much what we did. But I can admit that a lot of it felt rushed. At least the lyric process didn't, because a lot of those lyrics I had written way before we'd even decided on the album. But with recording, we had never practiced the songs together. We had never even played them together to see how they would sound. Everything was pretty much me, like, sitting at home, recording the guitar and vocals, sending it to my bandmates. Andy would record drums at home, send the drums to our producer, and then I would go to the studio and do like a newer version of the vocals, guitar, and then the bass would get done last. And you know, we kind of like, everything ended up coming together, and I am very proud of it. I'm extremely proud of how we were able to come together without even playing these songs in each other's presence. But that was a big thing for me, that I said, whenever we're releasing, even if it's just another single, I want to sit and write together. I don't want it to be, you know, so separated. And I know we couldn't really control like the being separated, because we were all completely in quarantine, like completely locked down. I didn't leave my house until July, until I got back into work. So we didn't have that opportunity to really connect as a band together and to work on those songs, and to figure out how to fill that empty space that a lot of them had, because we had all written separate parts and just kind of threw them together. And then we listened to it and we were like, this is great. And we did test, we kind of tested out in our song Photograph how we can fill that empty space, and Andy did a lot more with the percussion for it. Like, he had a cabeza, a few shakers, and that's the only song that has anything like that. And that's our favorite song off the album because it's so full. Where everything else, it's not that they're not full, but they're not, you know, if they're a glass of water, they're not really to the top just yet. So for LP2, that's my main focus. You know, I want it to sound 10 times better than Tight, but I want it to sound a lot fuller than Tight. I want to fill up every inch of empty space we have so that we can give people a really great listening experience. And also like just be able to love the songs. Like we love the songs on Tight, but it's almost like, you know, you love it and it's like, oh, I'm proud of these, but it could be better. Like I don't want to say that it could be better. I want to say this is the best thing we've ever done, and we're just going to keep going up from here.
Yeah, that's incredible. And thank you so much for sharing so much of what went into Tight. I mean, I think that's such a cool, like, little piece of album history for it. I think that's so interesting with how it came together. And I definitely do understand, like, how the next album will naturally be different when it comes to, you know, creating apart versus creating together. So folks, if you want to stay tuned and make sure you are right there when LP2 comes out, make sure to check their social media links down below. You can also check the music links down below to make sure that you are listening to Tight still, because it is still an incredible album that you don't want to miss out on. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Stay tuned for next week, folks, and Fox Teeth will be playing us out.